All right, so here's my setup. It's not perfect, of course, but it does work. It is functional, and it actually works quite well, and it's nice and simple. So like I said, this is the table of my drill press, and it's set down low so I can get over top of the spring compressor and have a lot of force on it if I need it. Just a simple cargo strap wrapped around the cylinder. You can see where it's connected to itself here. You've got to keep the strap out of the way of whichever spring you're working on. So obviously I just did this spring and I needed to have access to get the spring compressor into here. So now I'm going to loosen the strap. I'm going to bring the strap over on top of this side and move it down off of this side so that I can come in here with the spring compressor and do this spring. So it's not ideal, but then again, I'm not a professional engine shop, so I make do with what I've got. So I'm going to move the strap, I'm going to compress that spring, put in its retainers, and then I'll move on to putting in the piston. Here's another shot just to give you an idea what the spring compressor looks like when it's installed. You can see it slips inside the bosses for the rocker arm pin, and then this is just a piece of tube that I added. That's what the actual compressor looks like. This is not enough leverage to compress the spring comfortably, and with this handle being so skinny, it irritates my hand. So I just put this round tube on here. If I need to, I can slide it back to give me more leverage, but it's just a bigger round surface. It doesn't bother my hand as much. And you just compress the spring, throw the retainers in. It's a little tedious. I'm not 100% convinced that this is specifically made for these types of springs on these types of engines. I mean, it works, but it's a little flimsy and it's a little tedious because if you don't get this on the spring quite right and you start cranking down on it, it will cock the spring, and then you can't get the retainers in. So you got to make sure as you're pulling down on this that this plunges the spring flat so you can get the retainers in. But it's a learning curve. It makes more sense when you actually do it. But it's a non-event. So I just wanted to show you real quick what this setup looks like. And like I said, it's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it works, and it works just fine. So, all right, I'll talk to you guys here shortly. Howdy, everyone. Well, you can see that I've got the cylinders now, at least to this stage, they're ready for installation. The only parts of the valve train that I have in place, obviously, are the lifters, or the valves, and the springs. So the rest of this valve train gets assembled after these are installed on the engine. I've got the pistons in place on all 4 cylinders, and these are ready to install. So the idea is, so let me back up a little bit. Cylinders are easy to assemble because I shouldn't say you can't screw things up, but my point is, if everything is brand new, if the parts are brand new, you can't get the valves wrong because they're physically 2 different sizes. The springs are all the same, so it doesn't matter which pair of springs you put on which valve. And the retainers are also different, so you can't inadvertently put these retainers on this valve and vice versa. I mean, I suppose anything's possible, but it's very obvious when you look at the stems. The stems are completely different, and that dictates which retainers you use. However, with these cylinders, since these cylinders have already been assembled and the engine has already been run, I wanted to make sure that I used the same valves on the same cylinder with the same springs, things of that nature. So when I did the disassembly, I bagged everything as a set, like I talked about before. So these 2 springs came off of this particular valve, and this particular valve came out of this exact location on this cylinder. So I didn't want to take this assembly out and use it on that cylinder when I put it back together. The valves were lapped to the individual seats. So of course they're like a match set. So I wanted to make absolutely sure that the valve went back into the cylinder that it came out of. So that is all done. Same thing with the pistons. The pistons have been mated with the rings, and they've been mated with the cylinders, and they've been run. So I wanted to make sure that I put the rings back on the exact same piston in the exact same location, and the same piston into the cylinder that it had originally came out of. And like I talked about before, I had even marked on the cylinder which side of the cylinder is up and which side of the cylinder is down, or the piston, I'm sorry, which side of the piston is up and which side is down. Because the piston can go on like you see it here. Of course, it could also go in 180 degrees. I don't know that it matters, but I just felt better making sure that however the piston came out of the cylinder, that's how it goes back in. I didn't want to have it 180 degrees. So I went ahead and labeled everything. So that's all. These are all ready to go, like I said. So the next step is to remove these torque plates. Now, the instructions, they have you install the torque plates, of course, and do all this other work. And now at this point, according to the instructions, they say to remove the torque plates. And then you are to install all 4 cylinders, hand tight. And then you're supposed to torque all 4 of them. Now, I'm considering doing it a little bit different because this has already been torqued. And I don't necessarily want to untorque all of the through bolts at once, especially because the instructions tell you to pull the torque plates off, all of them, put all 4 cylinders in place. Now, I take that back. Pull the individual torque plates off, and then spin the engine so the number 1 and number 2 cylinder connecting rods are sticking out as far as they can go. And then you put those cylinders on, and then you rotate it some more to get the 3 and 4, or the 1 and 2 and the 3 and 4. So you rotate it till the connecting rods for these 2 positions are out all the way, put the cylinders on, and then you rotate it some more to get the other connecting rods out as far as they can come out, put those cylinders on. So you are rotating the engine with the through bolts unloaded. I'm not particularly a fan of doing it that way. So here's my plan. This is torqued with torque plates. Everything is, the main bearings are crushed appropriately through the torque of the through bolts. So my plan is to take 2 torque plates off and gingerly rotate the engine, put those 2 cylinders on, torque those 2 cylinders, and then take the other torque plates off, rotate the engine appropriately, put those cylinders on, and torque everything. That way I don't necessarily lose all the torque throughout the entire engine at one time. And if you think about if people have ever done or have seen done cylinder replacements done on actual mounted engines in aircraft, they don't unbolt all 4 cylinders just to replace the one. They leave everything, or they should leave everything that they can torqued and just work on this single cylinder. So that's kind of my plan of attack. I'm only going to pull off torque plates as I need to install the cylinder. Then I'm immediately going to torque those cylinders before I remove the other torque plates. That's basically the bottom line. So I think I'll do that next. I still need to do some work on the servo, the fuel servo, which is going to mount here. That still needs to be worked on and then mounted. And then I've got these couple of pads on this side here. I don't know which one. I don't know if they both get used, but the alternator brackets go here. I don't know if I should do those first and then do the fuel servo, which mounts here. Or if I'll just go ahead and do the cylinders first, because cylinders aren't going to be in the way of any of this. So we'll see. But anyway, that's the plan. So hopefully when I come back, I'll have a couple of the cylinders, if not all of them, in place. And that's that. All right. I'll talk to you guys later.